You are listening to
The Actuarial Business Podcast.
with MJ, the fellow actuary.
Hi everyone, it's MJ and welcome back to the podcast. Hope you guys are enjoying the little jingle that we made with AI as a bit of an intro for this. And what we're going to be doing is, we're still very much in the introduction of the DK Big Ideas Simply Explained business book, which we're using as our theory. And the idea is that we're going to be going through that book and then challenging it with some actuarial thought and sprinkling in a little bit of my own experience and my own personal journey in starting a business. So that said, let's jump into the introduction of DK. This is episode 2, because I think in episode 1, we didn't even get we were reading a few quotes in the book, and we didn't actually even get into the introduction. So we're going to do that now, and the introduction reads as follows. It says, from the time that goods and services began to be traded in early civilizations, people have been thinking about business. Now, I'm maybe gonna have a bit of an issue with that as our opening statement, because to me, the concept of business, it's a very, very new field. The theory and all the thoughts that we're developing around it are recent. Even going through this DK book, it's not like, we're going to start with Plato and Socrates and hear their thoughts on business. No, it's kind of like only really in the 19th and 20th century that business theory starts to emerge. And of course, because we spoke in the last podcast about this revolutionary concept of the limited liability, where people could have their liability limited from a legal perspective, is going to then allow them to take on risk or allow them to invest capital and say, okay, that's the maximum amount I'm going to lose. If anything bad happens, I'm protected in my personal capacity. And it's that basic idea that is going to explode business. Yes, we have business in a sense with the Dutch East India Company, where people were trading shares. But that was a big, huge, almost government-like institution, whereas business, where, it's the blacksmith, it's the shoemaker kind of incorporating, only really happens later on. So when I hear the word business, I'm thinking of the legal construct. Of course, in the DK book, they're kind of thinking of business as any sort of economic activity. And we got to be always incredibly mindful when discussing topics of any sense that we're on the same page with regards to definitions. This is something I learned in actuarial science, where when discussing models with other professionals, other actuaries, other stakeholders, make sure you're all on the same page regarding the assumptions. If you have different assumptions, then you're going to come to different conclusions, because maths is maths. That part stays the same, but different assumptions is going to direct the maths in a different way. And I believe the same happens when it comes to discussing other things as well. If we have different definitions on concepts, then logic and reason is going to direct us to different conclusions. And you kind of see this a lot in, say, theology. Another passion of mine is that subject, and people having a different definition of God, church, salvation, purpose, existence. Different definitions is going to lead to different answers. And this is why a lot of the times, especially in something with theology, people just butt heads and result in flame wars online. Whereas with business, we do tend to have slightly better definitions. There's a bit more of a consensus, but we're reading the very first sentence of this book, and already there is some disagreement over the definition of a business. Is it any economic activity, or is it more formalized, where, like I say, it's limited liability, there's legal constraints, and it creates this environment for these very clear-cut different stakeholders of shareholders, managers, employees, compared to, say, just doing something, and because it's adding value, you can call it business. So like I said, we're taking on the very first sentence, and I got to be careful because otherwise we're never going to get through this book. If we take each sentence and we start pulling it apart, this podcast series is going to go on for forever. The thing is that if we skip through the whole introduction for the entire book and we come to the introduction for, the first part of the book, which is around startups. So it says, start small, think big, starting and growing the business. And we read the introduction for this part. Again, I'm gonna disagree. And because they're coming up with a statement that says, all businesses start from the same point and idea. Already, my statistical mind, whenever somebody says all of anything equals something, it's like, that is too big of a statement. There's always a lot of exceptions that can challenge it. But even if we were to say most businesses start from the same point and idea, I would still even challenge that weaker statement, because I don't think all businesses start from ideas. I think all businesses, or most businesses, to have the slightly weaker statement, most businesses start from communities. If you do not have a community, you cannot have a business. Now, what do I mean by a community? It's a group of people, bit of a shared identity, bit of a shared purpose, and having some sort of interactions with each other. Bit vague. I mean, might as well say, businesses need people. And yes, people, social. I think too many times we forget the social aspect of business. We think, finance is all about maths and business is all about getting deals done. It's all about being in the boardroom. Oh yeah. And it's like, no. It's about the people. It's about the community. And if you're not addressing or adding value to that community, either in solving a problem of theirs or creating a desire and then fulfilling it, you're going to have a really tricky time getting your business off the ground. So for those of you who are like me, we're starting businesses, we're at ground zero, you're listening to this podcast because you're like, okay, I'm interested in business. How do I get into this field? Because let's admit, it's much better running your own business than working for somebody else's. I mean, there's that classic saying that if you run your own business, you're going to work harder, you're going to earn less, but you're going to be a lot happier. And it's kind of like you either build your own dreams or you end up building somebody else's. And I hope I can say that and not offend too many people, because the people listening to this podcast are other business and entrepreneur like-minded people. And because if you're working in a job as an employee, it's not fun. Like, be honest with yourself. It's not fun. Yes, you get a nice salary and there's beautiful security along with that. And if you've got responsibilities, you have to. But if you do get given the chance to be an entrepreneur in one's life, take it with both hands and jump at it. And that's why I want to say it's not about an idea, because I think people come up with ideas and they're like, I've got this great idea. It's going to be like the Uber for whatever. And then they try and build an idea around it. And it's like, well, where's your community? Because from your community should come your customers. Customers are like that part of the community that you're addressing is going to be your customers. So if there's no community, how are you going to have customers? If you've got no customers, well, who's going to be funding the business in the long term? Yeah, maybe in the short term, you've got a great idea. You can convince your rich uncle to sink some capital in it and you can have a fun time for, 2 years. But if there isn't that continuous revenue coming into the business, it's going to die out. And so community is critical. Even if you're getting sponsored by government or some other organization, they're only going to really want to be funding you if you are assisting and helping a community in some direct, maybe an indirect, but primarily direct manners. So when this book says all businesses start from the same point, we should cross out where it says an idea and we should write in a community. And because look, the next sentence is, it is what happens to that idea that determines business success. I'll be like, no, it's if you're addressing an issue or problem of a community and you come up with an idea on how to do that, that's going to determine business success. The next statement they're saying is, according to Entrepreneur magazine, nearly half of all new startups fail within the first 3 years. Beating the odds at startup is tough. First and foremost, an idea, no matter how good, must be combined with entrepreneurial spirit, defined as the willingness to take risk. Ooh, they're mentioning risk, which as actuaries is probably the most exciting thing to us. We love risk. We love the philosophy of risk. We love the mathematics behind risk, the frequency, the severity, the correlation, the capital required. But before we get into that, let's back up a little bit, where it says, according to Entrepreneur magazine, nearly half of all startups fail. Okay, I'm going to say that number is so much higher by just throwing out that actuarial concept of survival bias. Okay, there are so many startups that begin and fail and nobody wants to talk about it and they get unreported. So when it says half of startups fail, how are they defining a startup? Somebody who's registered a business and then fails, somebody who starts the activity and then fails, or only people who've got funding and made a statement somewhere? Because again, I would challenge, how are they getting that information? How are they accounting for survivorship bias? But it doesn't take away from the point that most businesses are not going to make it. And I think the reason why most businesses don't make it is, one, they're not addressing an issue of the community. They're thinking, oh, a cool idea is better than, like I say, addressing a problem. And two, there is this concept of risk. And risk is a fascinating concept that, I mean, as actuaries, someone who's been studying it, who's got the SARA designation in enterprise risk management, risk still baffles and is a huge source of confusion in my life. Absolutely love it. But this idea that, most businesses fail, it's an interesting one, because if you are hyper aware, like if you know the true stats on how many businesses fail, that's actually going to kill your entrepreneurial spirit. You're going to be like, whoa, there is no way in hell that I'm going to start a business when the odds are so low. So a hyper rational person is going to be like, no, I'm not starting a business. You almost have to be irrational to start a business, knowing the stats, knowing the odds. Like, you have to have such a good proposition, such a good community, such a good, combined with an idea to solve their problem, that you're like, okay, cool, we're gonna beat the odds. And I think this is where specifically America has been very good at keeping or pushing this lie that businesses are more successful than what they are. What I mean by this lie is that when you read newspapers, you read news stories, they're always talking about the winners. Oh, look at Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, Bill Gates and Windows, Steve Jobs and Apple. Like, we love to, well, when I say we, the Americans love to create champions out of their entrepreneurs, put them on pedestals. I mean, even Elon Musk, a South African, has gone to America, and what they're calling him President Musk now. He's risen to the top of American society. Love him or hate him, he's up there at the top as an entrepreneur. And it's this inspiration that causes so many people to want to get into business, want to start doing it. The risk is high and millions of them get wiped out. But hey, let's not report on that. Let's not talk about it. And I guess the lie goes both ways. Not only do newspapers want to focus on winning stories, but we as the readers also prefer reading stories that have happy endings. You go and watch a movie, you want the good guy to win. How horrible is it to read a story and then see that the good guy dies at the end or the business fails? We don't want to consume that negativity, so we choose to read the goodwill story. So we keep hearing that, and we have this cognitive dissonance, or I don't know, I'm throwing out a big psychological word there. Maybe I'm not using it correctly, but it's this idea where we have a bias in our mind thinking that we're more likely to succeed, maybe, shot with an injection of overconfidence, and you've got this entrepreneur, and throw 100 of us out there. All you need is for one of us to get lucky and succeed, and then another story is created which inspires the next 100,000 people to try and attempt this crazy game. So this idea of the entrepreneurial spirit in some corners could be considered as a spirit of madness, but on the other hand, as we were saying earlier, it still beats going to the office and working for somebody else. So it's still worth it. Yeah, if you can create a business, if you have the freedom to do so, I would say, yeah, take the leap of faith. It's a big jump. You're most likely going to fall, but hey, you might succeed. And it's not like life or death. Like, you know, you can always roll the dice again and have another go. So coming back to it, community is key. And I'm going to put down having the ability to keep trying again and again and again. Persistence, I'm going to say, is the next big ingredient that you need to have as an entrepreneur. So if one of your ideas fail, start again. I think too many people get caught up with this idea, like, oh, I need a great idea. And this book is reinforcing it by saying all businesses start from the same point, an idea. And they make this idea the focal point. And Carl Jung wrote something about ideas which blew my mind, because I always thought that, oh, if I come up with an idea, it's my idea. You know, it came up in my mind, it therefore belongs to me. Whereas Jung puts out this notion that ideas come to people. And I know that's a little bit weird to say it out loud, but you do look at like how the telephone came about, how two people came up with it at the same time. You know, what Alexander Graham Bell, and I think it was an Italian guy who kind of were almost racing for the patent, and how many times there's court cases around patents because people think that they came up with an idea. I mean, as of recording this, I know Vodacom, which is a subsidiary of Vodafone, telecommunication company here in South Africa, is in a court case with a guy called Makata around this idea called the Please Call Me. Now, even though there's another company, MTN, that says, no, they came up with the idea, and the Americans had a concept earlier called Buzz Me, and there's an engineer who's written a whole thing about how they came up with the idea because, and they actually like put down, without getting too much into the nitty gritty of how telecommunications work with missed calls and how you can't make a missed call without having airtime, but you can have an SMS like system sent with the capsule. Without getting too much into that, there's multiple people who've come up with this idea simultaneously. The court case is, of course, around this fact that one of the employees of Vodacom presented the idea to one of the managers. One of the managers presented it to the CEO, and then the CEO wrote in his book that he came up with the idea, and now that's in writing, and this employee can show that he had an email that predates, you know, the book and all these things. So this is where this whole court case is. It's around this idea, but when you take a holistic look on what was happening, this idea of please call me, of sending a message to someone to tell them to call you back, was quite prevalent and was already out there. And, you know, so much of our lives, we're constantly getting bombarded with information here, you know, a lot of input stimuli that's coming into the brain, that these ideas, and a lot of us get the same content and information and radio and news at the same time, it's likely that we come up with the same idea. So how the idea enters the brain, you know, that's a whole neuropsychological discussion that other people are better equipped to have than myself. But it's this notion that an idea comes to you rather than you forming the idea. And that changes my mindset quite a lot with regards to business. It's like, okay, this idea's in my head. It's not my idea. It's not mine, but it's in my head. Let me run with it. Let me talk to people. Let's build on it. If other people, this idea is floating around and I talk to other people about it, they might strengthen it. They might have other aspects, and we can build and we can create something really, really cool. I see it as a huge, huge mistake when people are like, no, I've got this great idea, but before I tell you, you have to sign an NDA. I'm like, do you even know what NDA stands for? Most of the time they don't, non-disclosure agreement. They just want to sign a piece of paper. And I get it. On the one front, like I say, people think that the idea is theirs and this is the most sacred part of the business and they have to protect it. But on the other hand, it's also like, ooh, we can now play business. We got a contract out, there's some pens, people need to sign it. And it's this play business that people wanting to get into the whole startup world. It's like, we want to be signing contracts around a boardroom table. And so if we can kickstart and do that on day one, it's like, oh, I'm a businessman now because I signed some paper. But think about it. If you go to a venture capitalist and you present them with an NDA, no venture capitalist in their right mind is going to touch that piece of paper for a variety of reasons. Okay. One, they're hearing countless ideas every day. They're going through countless pitch decks, countless meetings. If there is an off chance that you've got something in your NDA, it could prohibit them from doing a bunch of other businesses. So straight away, before they sign it, you are throwing out a huge risk at them because, like I say, ideas overlap. There might be an element of your idea that is common to other ideas. And if they've signed this NDA, then they might be entangling themselves in a court case that they don't want, where, let's say, one of the other businesses becomes huge and successful. You can take this NDA to a judge one day and say, listen, look, they signed my paper with my NDA that had this element. That business has now become successful. I want a part of it, even though you did nothing. Venture capitalists don't want that to happen. So they're going to take that NDA and they're going to throw it away. So if you're listening to this, if you're new to the whole startup game, I don't care what other advice you've heard in the past. NDAs, like, unless you've got a legal friend or a lawyer on your team who is insisting on it for very specific reasons, as a startup, it's highly, highly unusual for you to be running around with an NDA. Rather share your idea with friends, hear their feedback, share your idea with VCs, get that feedback. Because also, I'm thinking, if I'm putting my, the venture capitalist hat on for a moment, if somebody comes to me and says, oh, I've got an NDA, I won't talk to you unless you sign the NDA, then I'm also thinking, well, how important is this entrepreneur? How critical is this entrepreneur to their business that they're scared somebody else can take their idea and run with it? I don't want to invest in a business that idea is so sensitive any competitor can pick up and replicate. No, I want to invest in a business that has been led by an entrepreneur who's willing to share his idea in the open because he knows that he is a core critical part of that business, and without him the operations cannot continue. He's bringing something unique, he's got a competitive advantage, and wow, he's displaying this or communicating this by being so open with his idea. That's a business I want to invest in. That's a business that's going places. Something that's hidden behind an NDA, like I say, you're throwing too much risk on me and my other activities, but you're also communicating to me that maybe you're not the right person to be leading this business. And of course, like I said, there are exceptions. Maybe you've got a business with a chemist who's come up with something cool and it's patent pending, and there will be exceptions. But I'm saying generally what I tend to see is people are too excited to play the businessman and get the NDA out in the open. And it's like, oh, look at me, I'm signing contracts. Because the idea, it's, think of, I mean, this is a bit of a weird analogy, but business is it's like a baby, okay? And an idea is that inception point. It's going to be, take a bunch of time in the womb to mature, to grow. Like, you just think of an idea, give yourself time to nourish it, flesh it out. I mean, we're doing this right now with the PokeCoin, Pokemon card NFT market idea. It was like, oh, we should trade Pokemon cards as NFTs. Like, that was the idea. Fortunately, we went through the Lisk incubator babies, where it's had time to kind of just for 6 months, kind of think about it. Okay, how exactly are we going to do it? How are cards going to be submitted? How are cards going to be redeemed? What happens if a fake card comes into the system? How do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? What about the different languages? Are we going to have Japanese cards, English cards, both cards, but they follow different sets? You can start going down the rabbit hole. But the idea is trade Pokemon cards as NFTs. It's like, that's the idea. Throw that out there. But hey, good luck trying to form a business around that, because there's so much nuance that now surrounds it. So I don't have an NDA, and I talk to people about it. Hey, I'm even talking about it here on the podcast, because get this idea out there by discussing it, by talking through it. that is how you're going to strengthen it. So let your idea sit in the womb and let it grow. Look, because having a business, I mean, I'm not a lady, but I've heard it's quite painful, is giving birth. Having a business, in a way, is kind of like giving birth to this baby, because you've got this very delicate thing. It's incredibly painful. It's long hours. It's stress. It's risk. It takes a big hit on your finances. But hey, you push this baby out into this world, and then you've got to care for it. You've got to nurture it. You've got to look after it. You've got to be 24/7 in case anything goes wrong. You need to address this business. Not like, the office. Oh, it's 5 o'clock. You shut down the laptop, even if you're mid-call with a client. You're just like, okay, yeah, I'll pick this up tomorrow. I'm going on leave for 2 weeks or something like that. You can't do that with your own business. Okay. Again, you're still going to be happier. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to be stressful. And for a long time, a business is like a baby. It's vulnerable and it needs your constant attention, 24/7. So trying to protect the idea, it's like, no, that's the easy part. The hard part is in the execution, pushing it out there. So that is something that I want us to think about when it comes in. Look, the book continues by saying, not all ideas are good ones though. Yeah, like I say, ideas that are not addressing the community are bad ideas. It says, it would be a foolish entrepreneur who rushed a product to market without careful thought, research, and detailed planning. I don't think you need to do too much detailed planning, research, and thought. You just need to think community. Are we addressing a community? And with the Pokemon thing, I mean, being in the Pokemon community since what I would say 2020, 2021, buying and selling cards, I kind of started to see all the friction. And that's actually how I got my job at Polygon, whereas as their NFT expert, I was like, well, yeah, NFTs are so much better than trying to trade things in the physical world, because of all of these risks and frictions that the digital version would not have. And they liked my little presentation so much that I would eventually work for Polygon. And I mean, it even got to a point where I was explaining to the CEO of Ferrari Global what NFTs are using Pokemon cards. And fortunately, he knew what they were. He was like, his previous business, they engaged with it. And he said, his children also enjoy collecting those things. And I found that's also one of the amazing things about Pokemon as a franchise, is its ability to transcend cultures. So, I mean, we were playing the Pokemon World Cup in Hawaii, and Hawaii is on the opposite side of the world to South Africa. So I flew to Japan for a week before and a week back, just to break up that long journey. Do not like flying at all. And in my first week in Japan, there wasn't a lot of interaction with the locals. Coming back from Hawaii, wearing Pokemon shirts, because I was a competitor and I had some of the Pokemon merch on, I had people stopping me, asking me how I performed, what deck I was playing, this and that. And I was like, oh, not only are the Japanese people actually friendly, but they speak English very well, because in the first week, you'd maybe try and engage, and it was like, no, and they were like, fair enough. They're probably irritated by tourists getting lost in their city. But on the return back, having something with Pokemon on, and I mean, Japan, that's the birthplace of Pokemon. They've got jets that are covered in Pokemon. The airport's got Pikachu everywhere. It's amazing. So wearing some Pokemon merchandise, walking around Japan, people came up and chatted to me. And I think that's what's so cool about this franchise, is that it does transcend. And that's one of the ideas that we're looking at with the NFT marketplace, is to take communities that have been fragmented. Because think, if I'm in South Africa and I want to trade some cards, if I want to trade cards with someone in Japan, and even let's say Japanese cards, because there are a lot of South Africans who collect Japanese cards. There's a common thought that Japanese cards are of a higher quality than the English ones. So there are people in South Africa who collect Japanese cards. But now if you want to start trading with someone in Tokyo, there's the language barrier, there's a massive flight that you have to consider, the transportation costs. I even got something delivered from Japan the other day, and it took a couple of weeks. It's not an easy transaction to go through. So now that's considering both parties are ethical and good players in the market. You throw out the potential for scammers on either end, that's going to further delay it, that's going to add more and more friction. But if you have an NFT where it doesn't matter what the person's language is, doesn't matter what the person's, you don't even have to talk to someone. You put your NFT, you put your price. As soon as somebody meets that with a crypto payment, the smart contract locks in, the NFT is delivered to that person, you get the amount for it that you wanted, and happy days. Yes, they can make an offer maybe a little bit lower, then you can choose to accept. And normally when they put in an offer, they put the capital or they put the crypto into the offer. So as soon as you click yes, the money comes straight to you. And it's this beautiful, seamless transaction that I saw what was happening with my art. I mean, even now, I've kind of created a whole bunch of trading cards using Midjourney. Midjourney created a whole bunch of these trading card games, and they're selling for like around $75 each. And I'm like, wait, Pokemon cards in the physical world aren't like only like the really, really rare ones are trading for that amount. So there's also this belief that as soon as these Pokemon cards go online, become part of Web3, become part of the blockchain ecosystem, their value is going to increase. Because, hey, you're taking away the cost of carry, like there's no more storage cost on this thing. And what I mean by storage is, you need to put your cards in sleeves in a safe environment. You need to be very mindful of humidity, especially if you're living in a place like Tokyo that has got quite high humidity and those kind of weather factors. Having it NFT, having it stored somewhere else, you're going to add value there. Then the fact that it's on this blockchain rails, you've increased its tradability, that's increasing its liquidity and its marketability. So once again, its price is going to come up, and you're making it available to the entire world. You really are connecting all these Pokemon communities into one sort. So buyers will be happy because now there's more sellers, more variety, and sellers are happy because there's more buyers with more, with more money, and these things are going to start selling quicker. And as soon as they start selling quicker, more and more people are going to get involved in this. Also, you're removing a lot of the friction, so more people are jumping on board. And I think we spoke about this in the last podcast, where as soon as you digitize something, like for instance with photography, before it was only photographers who took photos, where now currently it's collectors who collect. But just how we made digital photography and now everyone takes photos, so there could be a situation where everyone starts to collect. And we are seeing that a bit with Pokemon Pocket, the virtual card app that Pokemon themselves have brought out. That's why, like I said, it's not even my idea was to trade things virtually. Pokemon themselves kind of had this idea as well. And who knows how much earlier they must have had it in order, if you think about the product development cycle that those things go through, it's not a short period by any means. So this idea has been out there, and essentially we could see a lot more people getting into collecting and trading. And like I say, Pokemon Pocket, 33 million downloads, 200 million in monthly revenue at the moment. These are very, very aggressive numbers if they're true. Always fact check my numbers, because I get them from like one source. I'm like, oh, that looks cool. And then sometimes I don't go and fact check them 10 times over, which is what a good journalist would do. Whether it's 200 million or not, it's a lot of millions that it's making every month. And this is on a virtual card. And I think people love the fact of opening the lucky packet. It's that, what am I going to get? So we're going to take these NFTs, we're going to then wrap them in a lucky pack smart contract, and then people can go in, use a PokeCoin to get a random card, and there's going to be that lucky dopamine rush. And you can get those PokeCoins by joining our waitlist. We're going to give a whole bunch of these tokens out for free. People can then stake them and generate other tokens, which will then eventually be used to get the lucky packets. We've got a little bit of an elaborate airdrop. I'll maybe chat about it in another episode. But essentially, that is the idea to kind of get people out there. So if you haven't already, join our waitlist, and it's going to be quite cool to continue this journey of building a business with you. So you'll be able to see how my business is going about. I've got I released this on Wednesday. So I'm going to be releasing this podcast on Wednesday the 15th. And that same day, that evening, I'm going to be pitching PokeCoin to a bunch of investors. We've got the LISC grant funding. Now we're going and chatting to the venture capitalists, and it's going to be fascinating to hear what they have to say. Are they going to be on board? Are we going to get funding, which is going to be a huge accelerating factor for our business? Or are we going to have to try and go back to the drawing board, refine it, and say, okay, no, this is why it's going to work, or this is what we need to change. And I think it's always important to take an idea and be flexible with it, adjust it if need be, believe in it, but not to the point that you become stubborn. I think that's another, and we can maybe end off with this warning, is if you've got an idea and it's bad, give it up. Okay, give it up. Go back to the drawing board, as they say. Either rethink it, flip it on its head, pull it apart, add other things to it, but don't become so stubborn around an idea, forcing it to work, because it might not. And ask yourself these questions. Does the community want this? Is this serving the community? That's like the first question. And if the answer is like no, if you think like, oh, I'm going to build this thing, and it's purely because you think it's cool and very few other people think it's cool as well, maybe it's not going to be there. It's kind of like, I think, a failed business idea that I can leave you off with that I read in the DK book was something around pet water. So it's bottled water specifically for pets. And I think the idea failed because the community that they were trying to address, the bougie people, they were like, well, why don't we just give human water to the dogs and to our pets? Like, let's just give them Evian or whatever water brand, Fiji, that we drink. That's meeting this high standard. Like, oh, look, I'm treating my dog so well, I'm giving them this premium water. Whereas if it's dog water, instantly you're thinking, oh, is there something wrong with it? If it's more expensive, why is it more expensive? Because at the end of the day, it's just water. There was a little bit of an idea that didn't work. Maybe that idea will work in the future. Maybe the mindset changes. But for that time, for that community, it wasn't working. So the best thing to do is to do something else. And I'd always recommend starting a business, failing, starting another business rather than going back to the office environment. And with that, we are going to wrap up and end this podcast. And play the rest of that little jingle that the AI made for us. See you guys soon. Well, next week for another episode. Cheers.
Listening to the Actuarial Business Podcast with MJ, the fellow actuary. MJ, the fellow actuary.